first guest here is astronaut Nicole Stott. Nicole is an astronaut, aquanaut, engineer, artist, and author who spent a total of 104 days in space aboard both the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station. Yeah, give it up for her. We're not even done yet. She was the first person to paint a watercolor in space, the 10th woman to perform a spacewalk, and today she's inspiring others through her art and advocacy with the Space for Art Foundation. Please welcome astronaut Nicole Stott. Our second guest is General Charlie Duke. Charlie is an Apollo astronaut, Omega ambassador, and the youngest person ever to walk on the moon. He served as Capcom during Apollo 11, backup pilot for Apollo 13, and in 1972 piloted Apollo 16, where he spent over 71 hours on the lunar surface, famously leaving a photo of his family behind. Please welcome General Charlie Duke.
Very much. Thank you.
Charlie, Nicole, we have to start this panel, as we do any watch panel, with what's on your wrist today? Nicole, go ahead and go first.
All right, well, Speedmaster. Yes, one of the really beautiful 38 millimeters. I love it. And, aside from the X-33 that I got to fly with in space, I love this watch. So I highly encourage you to consider this watch. It's gorgeous. And it reminds me, the way it looks and feels reminds me of the watch I had in space as well.
It looks great on you, too. Charlie.
Well, I've been wearing an Omega watch ever since 68 or so. We were given one at NASA to use for training, and I loved it because the stopwatch, and I was the lunar module pilot, and all of the burns that we had in space when we lit the engine. Okay, it's going to burn for 27 seconds. So when it started, I started my stopwatch. And when it got to be 27 on my watch, I'd start to say shut down, and bang, it shut down. So it was very important to have a stopwatch on that feature of us. And so I've enjoyed wearing Omegas, mostly Speedmasters ever since. And I've got a special one. They did a special edition for Apollo, and the one I'm wearing now has my Apollo emblem, Apollo 16 on it.
You were telling me this before. Maybe if you're from Omega, close your ears, but it sounds like they accidentally gave you two of these, huh?
Yeah, well, I don't know how I ended up with two, but my son found out I had one that was a spare, and I said, well, okay, you can have that one, and I'll keep this one.
Charlie mentioned it, and I'm going to start here with my first question for both of you, but Nicole, I'll throw it to you first. As we know, Omega's been a part of human spaceflight for 60 years now, from moon landings to the ISS. When you look at that legacy, what does it mean to both of you to be a part of a legacy stretching back that long now, and how it ties in with Omega?
Well, for me, I think it was something of like unexpectation, right? Like, first of all, just to be selected as an astronaut to fly in space, it's something you might dream of, but I always thought it was something other special people got to do, right? So ultimately being in that place, flying in space, was really surprising to me. But to be part of, things like this, the watches that we wear, Omega having had a presence since those first steps on the moon and before, knowing people throughout the training and leading up to flying in space that had flown with this watch before. Within the astronaut office, like in any industry, I think there are traditions that go along with it. This to wear an Omega watch was one of those things that you kind of felt like was this, like you had kind of crossed the line when you were in the astronaut office, when you finally were able to put one of those on your wrist, train with it, and then fly to space with it. And just knowing that the legacy it had made you feel a little bit weird, actually, to be part of that.
Charlie?
Well, as I said, we were issued, once we got it put on a crew, our backup crew, we were issued an Omega, and I've worn it ever since. Some model or some that, of course, weren't available back in the 70s, but now with that special watch, and I just we're very thankful again for the stopwatch feature of it, because it was very important to back up those burns. And when we plunged into the atmosphere, it was 25,000 miles an hour, and the command module didn't have any wings, but it had lift because the center of gravity was offset. And so it would come in and it would start to skip out again. And if you allowed it to skip out, you were on some trajectory that your batteries weren't going to last, and so you'd be dead. So it was very important to reverse roll at the right time. And so Mission Control gave us a time and said for the time that we would have a roll reversal. And so I was counting down from reentry interface till that time. And just as I started to say roll, it automatically pilot rolled it and went over. So it was very important to time these burns and to time these maneuvers. So the Omega that I wore was critical for the backup on all of these ignitions and burns and reentry maneuvers.
I'm going to ask you about Apollo 16 in a moment here, but before that, you were the voice, Capcom, for Apollo 11, the first moon landing. Can you just take us back to what the feeling was like when those first steps were made on the moon, and what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that?
Well, I was not actually on duty when he stepped onto the moon. Our shift with flight director Gene Kranz, we landed them and then safed the spacecraft, and then we turned it over to another flight crew, and not flight crew, but mission control crew. And so I had done the Capcom for Apollo 10, which was the beginning of the spacecraft to the moon. And so Neil Armstrong said, well, Charlie, you did it for them, why don't you do it for us? And so we had 2 months to get ready. And so it was a great honor to be there and talk him down. And everything was looking really, really good until they lit the engine. And then we had computer dropouts and overloads, and we had communication problems. And the mission rule said if you lost communication for 30 seconds, he was aboard. And so we scrambled to get it back, and then we had the computer problems, and they got down about 500 feet. 7,000 feet, the vehicle pitches forward, and they see the ground for the first time. And they didn't recognize it, so we had them targeted in the wrong position. And so Neil says, I can't land here, so he levels off and flies horizontally for a full 5 miles and uses up all the reserve fuel. So now we're down to 60 seconds. And one of the last 2 calls on Mission Control was 60 seconds, Eagle. It meant he had to be on the ground in 60 seconds, so we would call on abort. Then we call Eagle 30 seconds, and they weren't on the ground. And so 13 seconds later, I'd started my stopwatch, and 13 seconds later, I heard Buzz Aldrin say, contact, engine stop, and I knew they were on the ground. What a great relief. And anyway, if they'd have gotten to the abort stage and Eagle abort, if I'd have said Eagle abort, I'm sure Neil Armstrong would have said, say again, Houston. He wasn't going to abort. And Neil said, Houston, the Eagle has landed. And I said, no, he said, Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. And I was so excited I couldn't even pronounce tranquility. It came out twang in my southern accent. And so anyway, we got him on the ground, and I told him, you got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. It was so tense in Mission Control.
Those words kind of became endearing to the public, though, huh? I'm curious, as you mentioned, computer dropouts and failures and all of those things, it must have been reassuring to have a mechanical watch and stopwatch on your wrist, something that you knew wasn't going to fail, right?
Certainly, and they had watches on board, and they were timing, more importantly, they were timing on board with the same watch I had in Mission Control. And so when the engine started, I started a watch, and they started their watches, and so it was, the Omega had the backup with the stopwatch feature was very, very important.
Nicole, we've been talking about space, but you've been not only to space, but also to the deep sea. You're an aquanaut and an astronaut. Could you talk a little bit about the connection between the two and how your time in one has prepared you for your time in the other?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. The training that we do, especially for the long duration space flight, it's something we call expeditionary training. And so we go off to like the Utah Canyonlands for 10 days or winter survival training and things like that. And those are all really good. You learn things about your own strengths and weaknesses. You're challenged in different ways. But the reality is, in any of those places, you can use the sat phone, or you can walk to the minivan, there's a way out, right? You're not in a place that really requires you to deal with the issues in that place if they happen. To go live underwater for an extended period of time on an undersea habitat, the Aquarius habitat where I went to live on this mission is at 60 feet underwater off the coast of Key Largo. It's about the size of an old school bus. And so once you're down there for an hour, you can't just swim safely to the surface, right? Your body's so saturated with nitrogen, it's dangerous to do that. So just like in space, where if something goes wrong, you can't just hop in your spaceship anytime you want and just head home. You've got to make sure your vehicle is safe, your crew is safe before you do that. And that same thing is true underwater. And that deep sea environment is, in some ways, as extreme to us as human beings as the vacuum of space. And so we have to treat it that way. And when something goes wrong at 60 feet underwater, when you're in that condition, you have to make sure your vehicle is good and your crew is good before you can go back up to the surface. So that's the biggest thing in terms of preparation, what it's mostly like. But then it's like you're in this confined space with your crew, you're going in and out on these dives that we treat just like we would a spacewalk. We're doing science inside the laboratory. We're talking to our topside team like we would if we were talking to mission control. It is absolutely the closest parallel to what it's like to live in space, and I highly recommend it. Just like space, I highly recommend the undersea experience as well.
Beyond just traveling to these far-flung places, extreme environments, you've famously captured them as an artist. You painted a watercolor in space. Could you just take us to that creative act or that artistic act? What so inspired you to do something like that and capture it in that way?
Well, sadly, I'm not. I wasn't in a place really to think about doing that on my own, to think, ooh, I need to take a watercolor kit with me and paint, while I'm in space. But fortunately, one of the people that helps us prepare to go to space, dear friend to Mary Jane Anderson, she was the woman responsible for us packing our stuff to take on our mission. And as astronauts, at least on my first flight, I was really mostly concerned my checklists and making sure I had all the stuff that would keep me from screwing up while I was up there. And if I was going to bring anything extra, I wanted to take things for my family. We'll talk about the Charlie Duke thing, which stands out in history. But I wanted to take pictures of my family. I wanted to share the experience with them. But long story short, brought this watercolor kit with me. in hindsight, I think about it, and as I was doing, it's like, man, this is the way we put the human in human spaceflight, right? We bring these parts of us with us that might be unexpected. Whereas most people think about astronauts just as these technical science, they're just mission driven about all of what's going on. And that's true, but as human beings, we all have something else going on. And watercolors happened to be it for me. It was absolutely a personal highlight for me. And kind of like the way I think about this legacy of Omega and having a watch like this with me in space, I think about the other people who were there before me. And while I might have painted the first watercolor in space, I certainly wasn't the first person to do art in space or to play music in space or write poetry in space or create images that are incredible that you want to share. It's just part of something that we've done since the beginning of human spaceflight.
Charlie, Nicole just mentioned putting the human in human spaceflight, which I really like that idea. And you kind of made one of the perhaps most human gestures of all when you left a photo of your family. And I know Dottie is sitting over there to our right. Can you just take us back to that moment and talk about what it means to you now, all these years later?
I'd like to introduce my wife, Dottie's over here. 60. She's put up with me for 62 years, and I think we're going to make it. So the training in Apollo was all done in Florida at Kennedy Space Center, but we lived in Houston. So Monday morning or Sunday afternoon, we'd fly to Kennedy Space Center. We'd spend all week down there training in the simulators or whatever, and then we'd come fly back. So for two and a half years, considering Apollo 11 and back up on Apollo 13 and in 16, we just were gone a lot. And so she kept the home fires burning, and it was a teamwork effort as I see it. And the training in Apollo was mostly in the simulator. And fortunately, none of the simulators in Houston really worked. So you had to go to Florida to train. And then once you got down there, of course, you had to do EVA preps and, learn how to put on your suit. Our spacecraft was as wide as from that table to the end of this table over here, a little bit more. And so we had two of us in there, and we had to get into a spacesuit with a backpack and everything else. And so we trained and trained and trained and trained. And we also, the most important was training to land. And then the simulators, I bet you I crashed on the moon 1,000 times. But I landed 3,000 times, so we really knew how to do it. And the actual landing on the lunar surface was exciting, of course, and unfortunately, the photographs that we studied of our landing site had resolution of 40 feet. So objects smaller than 40 feet you couldn't see in this photograph. So at 7,000 feet, we pitched over. And man, there are a lot of craters down there less than 40 feet, and all these craters appeared. And John said, "Look at all those craters down there." And I said, and we started chatting a little bit, but we had to be specific. And so he picked out a spot, and we ended up landing probably within 200 meters of our landing intended spot. And he picked a spot we were dead level when we landed, which makes it very easy to work around the spacecraft and get the car off and get the experiments package off and stuff like that.
What stands out to you about those days on the lunar surface once you finally landed in the highlands there? What stands out to you about spending time on the moon?
I felt right at home first because we recognized all these major landing spots. We were in the Descartes Highlands. If you consider Neil Armstrong landed at sea level, we were 8,000 feet above that in lunar geology or topography. And so as we landed and we got there and we recognized all of the major landing spots and the objectives, I should say, of the craters where we would visit and the geology that we would do. And so I felt when I got on the surface, I said, I felt at home. I said, I've studied this for 2 years. And it was very familiar. There's Stone Mountain over here, and there's Smoky Mountain over there, and North Ray Crater's right over that hill. And so you just knew where you were, and you recognized it all. And so you felt that gave you a feeling of being right at home. But it was also a feeling of wonder and awe. You could hardly believe that I'm on the moon. I'm on the moon, and finally, and so it was. But then you got outside, and like I said, the familiar landscape appears to you, and so that gave you the feeling of being at home.
I have to ask you, Charlie, because especially the way you describe it as like feeling at home, did it feel more like home when you left this picture of your family on the moon?
That was very special time, and it did. When I dropped that picture onto the moon, fortunately it landed face up, and I could take a picture of the picture. And it was the only family picture left on the moon. And so our boys were like 5 and 7 or so, I guess it was at the time. And Dad was gone all the time, so I said, well, you guys want to go to the moon with Dad? He said, yeah, that'd be fun, Dad. And I said, well, we'll take a picture, and y'all can come to the moon with me in this picture. And they thought that was a great idea, so we had the picture taken, and I dropped it, and I took a picture of the picture. Well, the temperature on the moon surface at that point was like 180 degrees Fahrenheit. So this picture starts curling up right away. And fortunately, I got a picture before it curled up and faded away. The moon environment's very rough on things like that, and car and the spacesuit's got to work, and but you don't worry about all of that stuff. You got your flight planned and you do the job, and hopefully everything's going to turn out okay.
Nicole, not dissimilar, you've talked about seeing Earth from space and how that perspective can be transformative. Can you just unpack that a little bit for us and what that means?
Yeah, and as Charlie was describing this experience on the moon, the words awe and wonder, he used them, and I think they're totally appropriate. I can only imagine. And I mean, when I looked out the window from first the space shuttle and then later the space station windows, I remember, I don't know if it's not reminiscing because I wasn't there, but thinking about what it must have been like to be someone like Charlie Duke on the moon, looking back at the Earth in a way where you saw all of the Earth. In its entirety. And I was on these vehicles where we're, I don't know, about 300 miles above the surface of the planet. So not that far in the grand scheme of things, but oh my gosh, out the window, the planet, and I say that planet because we live on a planet in space, just opened up from horizon to horizon for me. And I think it's awesome. And as much as you try to prepare for what it's going to be like, looking at the pictures and videos, talking to your colleagues about what they experienced, nothing really prepares you for having that experience yourself. And every time I looked out the window, it was surprising and beautiful. And at the same time, I remember feeling a little bit conflicted by it too. Things like watching a hurricane that looks like this white, fluffy, beautiful mass moving across the planet that looks white and fluffy and beautiful, and knowing that it's anything but that, to the people that are on the surface of the Earth, right? Which makes you think about all the other things that look beautiful but might not be. And I think in all of it, it came down to this sense of like interconnectivity, that, we are all on a planet in space. We're all Earthlings, only border that matters, that thin blue line of atmosphere. And the reality of our planet as our spaceship, right? Considering it that way, just the way we do these machines, that from there to there spacecraft that Charlie flew to the moon in, and how important it is for that machine to support our life so that we can be in that place. The same is what's happening here on our planetary spaceship. And in the end, the greatest thing I think that came from it was that reality check of who and where we all are in space together, and how important it is for us to accept our role as crewmates and not passengers here on our planetary spaceship. And one of the things, and Christina is over there, that we, and with Charlie and Dottie and others, like to express is how important it is to accept that role as a crewmate. Because by doing that, I really do believe we have the power to create a future for all life on Earth that's as beautiful as it looks from space.
When we got to the moon and we went around the back side of the moon and we came around to the front side, and I saw Earth rise for the first time. And my first thought was, we're a long way from home. I hope this thing holds together for the next 3 days. And of course it did. And then it was that jewel of Earth just suspended in the blackness of space. And later on, after I became a Christian, I read in the Bible, God sits enthroned above the circle of the earth. Now, I didn't see God, but I saw the circle. And in another one, it says, when God made the earth, he suspended it upon nothing. And that's exactly what it looks like.
Which is awesome.
That's great. Thank you both for sharing. I'm going to ask you both one more question, and then I think we're going to open up for a few Q&A from the audience. So get your questions ready if you've got any. The question I want to ask both of you, and I think I'll start with Nicole, is you two represent different generations almost of astronauts in space exploration. Omega's been there along the entire way, all 60 years. Can you just talk about what it means to be a part of that entire story, and then how it's changed over the years from generation to generation, but how it's also connected perhaps?
Well, I like the word you use. I think in the end, it's all about connection in one way or another. I feel really blessed to have been part of the space program, flying in space during that time when I was. Don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have been in the spacecraft with John and Charlie as well, heading towards the moon. I cannot, and I'm hopeful still to maybe one day get to the moon. But I think there's something that goes along with human spaceflight that really ultimately is about improving life on Earth. And I think about that when I think about the legacy of Apollo, when I think about what we've done shuttle and station, how we've brought international partnerships together in a way that sometimes is pretty challenging down here on the planet, and how that will lead us into the future. And I think all of those kind of baby steps that we've done are what it's going to make it possible for these next Artemis missions to happen, and for us to get back to the moon, and to continue doing things off the Earth that ultimately are for the Earth.
Charlie, as a member of the Apollo program, anything to add about being sort of part of the fabric and the story of space exploration and how it's changed over the years?
Well, it certainly has changed. Apollo was so successful that they canceled the last 3 missions, which really didn't sit very well with the astronaut office because they had the crews already selected. And anyway, it was a tremendously successful program. And we collected a total of 600 pounds of moon rocks, which are totally different from the rocks down here on Earth, and as far as mineral content goes. And so have been involved with that program that was so far-reaching experimentally and accomplishments, well, I was very proud to have been selected. I didn't think I had a chance to go, but working with Neil Armstrong on Apollo 11, and then being backup. Then I got picked for backup crew for Apollo 13, and then. And I thought my career was over about a week before Apollo 13. I catch the measles and expose everybody to the measles. And so they had to change the crew. And Mattingly was taken off the crew, and Jack Swigert went on the crew. But Lovell, they had a week to train, and they got ready to go. And so we supported them as backup crew. And when they had the explosion on the way to the moon, John and I, we spent 35 hours in mission control, either in the simulator or at mission control advising the mission control team of how we going to get them back. We had a spacecraft that was built for two guys for 3 days. Now we got 3 guys for 4 days, with battery power. How does it last? And so mission control were the hero, in my opinion, the heroes of Apollo. They saved the day on every mission. In some way or other, they came up with the right scheme or the right idea or the right procedure to make it work. And my accolades and for mission control cannot be too strong, because without mission control, Apollo would have been a disaster on a number of the missions.
I'll resist asking any follow-ups because it feels almost selfish, because it's not every day you get to talk to an astronaut. So if there's any questions from the audience, first of all, thank you all so far for the insightful answers. But if there's questions from the audience, yeah. Gentleman in the front, please.
I'm wondering if you could tell us a little more of your perspective on Apollo 13, and then maybe how Omega played a part in the trip around the backside of the moon that was important for the slingshot back to Earth.
Apollo 13 was almost a disaster. If it hadn't have been for mission control to come up with a procedure to power up the lunar module as the lifeboat and to use it for 4 days as a survival vehicle, they would have been dead. They would not have made it. It was all mission control, and what do we power on? What do we power off? How do we make these batteries last for 4 days with 3 guys in a vehicle made for 2 guys? And it was a tremendous effort. And John and I spent a lot of time in the simulators helping to solve these problems, and so turn off this, turn on that. Do this, do that. And the crew performed flawlessly. We were running out of canisters to remove the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And we didn't have any, the lunar module had a round canister, and we ran out. So how do you get the CO2 back down? Well, the command module's got we got scrubbers over there, but theirs were square. How do you get a square one in a round hole? And so Mission Control came up with a solution of this special thing, and that they were always saving the day. I mean, the Mission Control team was so outstanding in the knowledge that they had of the spacecraft and how we could make it work this way or that way. And I got to work in mission control for Apollo 10, Apollo 11, back up on 13, and back up on 17. And we were just sat there helping them, and they were really outstanding. And so anyway, they figured it all out, and we made it back.
Can I add one thing to that? Because kind of going back to your earlier question about what, how things have changed, what came forward from all of this. Some of those guys, young guys that were in mission control, figuring all that stuff out, ended up being my bosses, the leadership within NASA when I was, a young engineer there. And I know for a fact that the critical lessons that I have carried forward with me since then came from their experience in that place. It seems like those things they did were impossible, right? But what they carried forward was this philosophy, first of all, that whatever the problem is, you have to believe there is a solution to it. You got to go into it with that belief. We are going to solve this problem. And I have it written on a sheet of paper. Jay Honeycutt, Charlie, you know him. And what he told all of us young engineers when we first came in on the shuttle program was, okay, this is the way we are going to operate as engineers making the shuttle program work. We are going to operate with a here's how we can, not why we can't approach to everything. And it's amazing. I use it with my plumbers at home. I use it at the bank. I use that, okay, I'm going to go in with here's how we can, not why we can, and hope they'll follow. But that's how we get to the moon. That's how we solve these really challenging problems. And I can just see those guys putting square things in round holes and figuring out how to do that because they believe it was going to work.
Can I have one of the young gentlemen here?
What inspired you to be an astronaut?
Well, it was the best, for me, I was a test pilot. And the best job you could have as a test pilot was be an astronaut. So when the time came for, as a test pilot, when NASA said, we're looking for more astronauts, and it lists the qualifications for an astronaut, I said, that's me. And so I applied and fortunately got selected. And it was a tremendous 10 years for me as working basically Apollo program. The last 4 years I was there, I worked on Space Shuttle and got it ready to go. And my commander on Apollo 16 was the pilot of the first Space Shuttle and the commander of first Space Shuttle. John Young, he flew 3 programs. He flew Gemini, he flew Apollo, and he flew Space Shuttle. And nobody's ever done that since, flown 3 different missions.
And you know what else nobody did, that John Young and then Bob Crippen did, was to fly a human-rated spacecraft without a test flight of that vehicle before it being flown. That was a pretty impressive thing to see happen.
Nicole, briefly, what inspired you?
Wanting to know how things fly, first of all. I'm old enough, maybe you won't believe it, to have watched gentlemen like Charlie walk on the moon and really thought that was a very cool thing. But it was like, wow, that's something other special people get to do. It didn't seem real to me. It seemed awesome, but not real. But later, wanted to know how things fly. If you want to know how airplanes fly, why would you not want to know how rocket ships fly? And that kind of led me down this path to working as an engineer with NASA and then discovering what astronauts do. And like Charlie, figuring out, wow, I'm doing a lot of these things already. And the big thing for me was kind of getting the nerve to just pick up the pen and fill out the application. And that was a difficult thing to do. I really struggled with it, and I was grateful to gentlemen like Jay Honeycutt, who I mentioned before, and a couple of our mentors who just encouraged me to pick up the pen and fill out the application. But I think the thing that really, aside from the adventure side of flying in space, which I highly recommend that as well, but discovering after working for NASA for a while that really everything we're doing there is, and I know I've said this before, in one way or another helping us improve life on Earth. And as a person with a 7-year-old son, when I flew the first time, that was super important to me, that it wasn't just about the flying. It was about the work we were going to do there as well, and felt really, really blessed to be part of that.
Last question. Yes.
I have a question for Nicole. In your view, what's the most important reason for humans to keep exploring space?
Oh, wow. I think it gets back to the ways that space helps us improve life on Earth. And that's not just with human spaceflight. It's in every way that we are exploring space. I think ultimately in the grand scheme of humanity, we do need to get off the planet. You know, the sun's not going to be very nice to us in 1 billion years or so. So hopefully we have that Star Trek future in place already. But I think there's just a necessity in it. There's a really wonderful sci-fi author named Larry Purnell, who you might have heard this quote somewhere along the way, that the dinosaurs wouldn't have gone extinct if they had a space program. And the other half of that quote is something like, and we better be careful because if we don't have one, we will too, right? And I think it seems like, oh, that's kind of silly, but really and truly those are wise words. You know, every day we are positively affected by what is going on in space. The phone you had your question on, whether it's the camera or the way we can communicate or access to knowledge, all of our planetary challenges that we have, the bulk of the information that we need to solve them is coming to us from space. It's like we're measuring the vital signs of our planet from space. And so there are so many reasons, but I think ultimately it's about the way we can improve life on Earth.
Charlie, since it's our last one and it's a general question about the need to continue space exploration, anything to add? Anything to add to Nicole's answer about the need to continue space exploration?
No, I'm delighted to see NASA continue on and finally going to the moon with Artemis. Artemis is the first few landings are similar to what we did on Apollo, which is in equatorial orbit. But then they're going to go start to the South Pole, and to change 90 degrees the orbit from around the equator to polar is a big challenge. And the surface, if you look at the photographs that were taken of the South Pole region, it's very rough. And they've got a big challenge, I think, on making successful landings. But NASA is used to big challenges, and I think they're going to, Artemis is going to pull it off. It's a little behind schedule, but next year should be a big deal for Artemis, where we get the first ones to the moon, and I'm all for it, and cheer them on. Hope I'm still alive when I get to see them land on the South Pole. So we'll see.
And for the younger ones in here, when you go, call us, please, and take us with you.
Tony, I just had one more from a young gentleman, and this is the actual last bonus question.
How does it feel like to be in a spacesuit?
Well, it depends on the spacesuit. She's got a different spacesuit than we wore. And it took me to suit up in the lunar module to get our spacesuits on and get everything checked out took 3 hours. And so you ended up with about 2 feet between you and your buddy once you put the backpack on and all of that, everything, and you plugged him in and he plugged you in, and so it was a teamwork deal. And then you got ready to get outside, and the door was down underneath the computer, right in the center, and I reached in and unlocked the door and pulled it open, and so I'm trapped behind the door. So John, the guy on the left, has to get out first. So if you wonder why Neil Armstrong was first on the moon, because he was on the left side. So he gets out, John gets out, and you get on your hands and knees and you back out, rear end first. And then you can hop down the ladder. And so I close the door, and then I open the door, and I get out. and I was very careful not to shut the door because we wanted to get back in. And so it was a thrilling experience to hop down the ladder and put a foot on the moon and said, I'm on the moon. It was a tremendous experience and feeling, and I thank America for paying our way, and I think that the Apollo program was one of the greatest experiments that the mankind has undertaken. When we first left that surly bonds of Earth and we traveled all the way to the moon.
Nicole?
Well, I'll just speak to the spacewalk and spacesuit because that's the one that was the most similar to what Charlie used to, I'll just say it, to frolic on the moon. And on the moon, there's still a little bit of gravity, right? So the thing that was different about having, another of the things that was different about having one of these big spacesuits on that weigh about 300 pounds. The full weight of these suits is like 300 pounds. So you're still feeling some of that on the moon.
Down here, when I put all my gear on, the backpack and everything, I weighed 363 pounds.
Yep.
Up on the moon, 60 pounds.
Yeah.
So you could bounce along, and it was easy to lose your balance up on the moon. And we fell down a lot, and it took 3 push-ups to get up for me. John, he never fell down. He had great balance, and there's John, my commander. He dropped something on the moon, he'd jump up and do a split S and reach down and pick it up again. I said, how did he do that? I could never do it. I tried it and fell down 3 times. So if you fell down on your face, you could get up easy. But on your back, it was a different trouble.
But think about it, on the International Space Station or on the space shuttle where I was, you're floating. There is, we call it microgravity. You're kind of falling around the Earth, so you always are, it's like you're going over the top of the roller coaster all of the time. So you're floating. And so what I was grateful for was that 300-pound suit that was really, we always said the pleasure is the pain. Some of the most physically challenging stuff I ever did in astronaut training was training to do a spacewalk in the big pool in this 300-pound suit. And you always had the smile on your face, unless you were hurting yourself, you had to be happy about it. 6 hours in the pool with that, and then to get to space and have it not weigh anything. You could move and get into any position you wanted really easily. You could get moving really quickly. So you had to keep in mind, okay, if I'm gonna get going fast, I gotta be able to stop myself too, because you still had that mass of that suit. But it was amazing how we could make something that really was so difficult here on Earth work so beautifully in the microgravity environment.
It's a great question, by the
Yeah.
way. Thank you one more time to astronauts Nicole Stott and Charlie Duke.
Thank you all for coming. God bless you.